I was that photographer. I was that photographer that thought having a studio made me a photographer, and that made me legitimate. And, you know, having a studio was the be all and end all. But in this video, I'm going to talk about the mistakes I made as I became a studio photographer. I travel a bit more, but it's the mistakes. And I'm not going to talk to you about gear that I bought. I'm not going to talk to you about the usual crap you see on these channels. I'm going to talk to you about the mistakes that I made that actually really affected my studio and how I ran it. This isn't me telling you to go buy this gear or do this. This is from a real photographer talking very realistically about owning a studio and operating in a studio. And I haven't seen this much on the internet, so here we go. I honestly thought that once I had a studio, people would magically book me, that somehow having a studio would mean people would want to run in and book me. And what actually I got was an empty studio, right? I didn't get a studio suddenly and with loads of clients. I had to build it up. And my biggest mistake was thinking that having a studio suddenly made me more legitimate than all the other photographers around me or photographers that I was looking at. It doesn't. In the slightest. I had to learn pretty quickly that photographers are booked because people like them. Clients book for your vibe, your style, who you are. They actually don't really care if you've got a studio because it's so easy to hire a space and you can factor it into your cost. So having a studio wasn't actually the benefit of being a photographer. It didn't give me much of a benefit other than the fact that I already had a place I could use. But honestly, you can hire places. I just needed to learn about marketing, and I didn't think when I first started, I was using my studio effectively when it came to marketing. I certainly wasn't talking about it as much as I should have been. I shouldn't have been talking about marketing in a way that I am now. And all those years ago when I took over the studio, I had no idea about marketing. I honestly just thought a studio would mean I get clients. One of the things I did not factor into was noise in my studio. And you might laugh at this, but literally this morning when I came to do this video, there was scaffolding being taken down from outside our studio space here. I do not get to choose what happens outside my studio, but sometimes I have a person next door who decides that they're going to do band practice. There's a theatre group downstairs. If they're doing a musical, the noise carries up. Now, don't get me wrong, we all coexist and live in this space, but sometimes I can't do photo shoots in here because of the noise level, or if they have an event running in the studio spaces in the communal areas because the noise is distracting. I could probably carry on, but does it give my client that client experience I'm after? Probably not. I love that this is a busy studio, but sometimes there's things that gets factored in that I didn't even think about. Those simple things like about the noise level and what goes on in this area, you need to pay attention, because some days I come in and the stairs are full of stuff because people are moving in and moving out. And if I have a client due any minute, I am going to have to somehow navigate them through all of that. But it's not just the noise and the mess, everything. It's also any communal areas I have to clean those more than anyone else does because they don't have visitors like I do. And that goes for the toilets. But the noise is something that shocked me a little bit because I like to work late at night. So I'll be in here editing and I'd hear the music coming up from the musical, or the neighbors doing what they're doing, or somebody upstairs running an event. And suddenly this is very loud because this is a very large space. So it takes a lot of noise and it can echo around, as you can probably hear on my audio because I forgot my mics. I'm so sorry. This is something you need to factor in. I mean, seriously, imagine if you were a newborn photographer, you're trying to soothe a kid and like there's a barking dog going on or drilling next door. These are little things that I made a mistake when I took over the studio. I love the studio. I love where it's located. I love everything about it. But there's these little things I think we're not talking about as studio photographers, the nuances of having a studio. Actually, while I'm on the subject of that, the childproofing your studio. Now, I don't do many children shoots, but every now and then I get children shoots in here for the Christmas minis or something. But little things like covering sockets up, making sure they weren't anything to trip over. All of these things. It's not just child-proofing the studio, but it's also adult-proofing it, because you need to make sure that there isn't things like they're going to trip over. You know, you have insurance you need to take care of, so you need to make sure you're adhering to your insurance requirements. So I have to be really, really careful about that. And also with that then comes the cleaning, the additional cleaning. You might think, oh, it's really easy. No, you need to clean every single surface. That includes washing things quite often. One of my biggest mistakes I made was not realizing that I can't use my studio all the time, and that sometimes I have dead space in the studio, and I need to make sure that I have a contract with my landlord that allows me to rent it out, and I have insurance to cover that. And in the past I have rented out my studio because I've been allowed to, but I've also had damages done. I had one photographer who stole all my trophies. I managed to get them back, thankfully. One of them was damaged. Another photographer cut a massive hole in my paper background that they hadn't actually arranged to use. And I only found out like a week after, when I found the holes. I was able to review the footage and see that actually it was them. I've had people like just abuse the studio space and use it for stuff that they haven't said they're using it for. I've also had a photographer in the past try and claim that this is their studio space and link their business to this, which is a big no-no for me. That's all in the past now, but you've got to remember when you have a studio, it is a weight and you have an obligation to pay the bills on it. So sometimes you need to really think about how often are you realistically going to shoot in it and how often are you actually shooting? Because frankly, I have weeks where I'm not in here because I'm traveling and I think, oh, I could have rented it out, but then I also need to have someone to check it. There's all these little nuances that worry me. And although I could pay someone to come in and check it, that's more money out of my account, you know? So yeah, be aware that there are dead spaces and how you work with that. This would be a great time for you to like and subscribe. Okay, love you. In fact, while we're on dead spaces and a completely different interpretation of dead space, I've seen people who've had studios and they have like a client setup area that they use to review images, and then it's very rarely used, and then they try and do all their shooting in one space. And I'm like that is a space that is just dead. You're not using it that often unless someone comes in for a client review. Why don't you use it as a multi-purpose space? It seems like we have like this desire to have very aesthetically pleasing spaces, but in hindsight, clients don't actually care. They just want it to be clean and tidy and usable. In my opinion, yes, it's nice to have the aesthetics and have the space, but not all of us can do that. I think we focus too heavily on making it look really good rather than making it look functional and safe. So for me, you need to find that balance. Don't just leave a space for, oh, this is my client reviewing area, but you only do like one client review a week. Like that seems a really poor use of the space. My client review area is actually the projectors on the wall on this side, and they have a sofa on that side that I pull the B flats away and it exposes, and then they can sit there and watch it all. But it doesn't take up any extra space for me, and I use the sofa quite a lot for photo shoots. This is a good one for those of you who are in a saturated place. Make sure that you actually have good marketing, because the last thing you want to be doing is setting yourself up and don't have the marketing down. I remember one studio photographer here in Northampton where people thought they were a takeaway because of their marketing. So for me, make sure that you are marketing your studio really effectively. Like you have it on Google Business, you show people can see how to find you. And I know this sounds really silly and a bit archaic. I have found having a landline, I know how retro of me, has been really good for me than just having a mobile phone. It didn't cost me anything extra really to have on, but it does give me a little bit as a presence that it is a physical space, not just contacting me on a mobile phone. I do actually have it diverted to my phone so they can, but yeah, having that. But make sure your signage is right, because I made the mistake of not having good signage, and for a while people couldn't find me. A very big thing that photographers often do is we go crazy for gear and we end up buying all sorts of things. And we got to remember, we got to buy stuff that we can use. There's no point. I was mentoring a person the other day. I was like, oh, I'm going to get an optical snoot. And I'm like, how often are you going to use that? We need to be really realistic when we own things that we're going to use them. We need to be able to store them and use them. The last thing you need is having shit tons of lights and nowhere to store them, but also having shit tons of light and they just get in the way and you're not using them. And that's a complete waste of money. So don't think you need to run off and buy stuff. For years, I was just using, this is a new version of it, just like this massive Octobox with a grid and a baffle on it for years and years. And then I would slowly add different softboxes. As it stands now, I have maybe 4 softboxes that I use on rotation for various things in this studio. The rest is if and when I want them. I think my biggest latest investment was my optical snoot, because I've been using that quite a lot, and I was borrowing one from a friend, and then I was like, okay, I'm going to make the leap and buy one. So yeah, think about that before you get a studio. Don't think you need to buy everything. You can do so much with one light and a V flat, or you don't even have to use a V flat. You can kind of see them just over my shoulder here. They're polystyrene boards that are painted. World, I would have a space where I can do that. Now, I do have a space I can hire that is fully accessible, but accessibility is something we should be looking at all times. I try to make it as accessible as possible, but for wheelchair users, I can't use this space at all. I'm on the first floor. There's no lift. It's a listed building. There's no way of getting something put in like that. What annoys me is that there are a lot of photographers who are going to these spaces that are built for creatives, and apparently they're not as accessible as they could be. In fact, one space I looked at here in Northampton promised me it had accessibility, but actually it was a shared ramp at the very back of the building, which meant my client would have to spend 10 minutes negotiating through the building to get to me. That doesn't say accessibility to me, considering that the entrance to my studio was literally straight into my studio. So if you were able-bodied or more able-bodied, you could get straight in, but the disability users, other people with disabilities, would have to go right round the back, park up, get across the curb, come in through the car park, then go through and spend 10 minutes going through the building. That doesn't say accessible to me. It just says an afterthought. So for me, let's look at more accessibility. And in the future, I probably will look to, maybe if I ever outgrow this place, to look for something that's more accessible, because that's what I want to do. And I think we should be doing for that. Oh, and just another thing on accessibility. This studio can be quiet, dimly lit, and I also have a sliding scale in my dressing room that tells people what their pronouns are. Would they like no music, less music, quieter music, their own music, wear headphones? They can just slide it across, because accessibility isn't just about physical accessibility, but accessibility for all sorts of things. I recently spoke about the fact that I was doing a seminar and I was given like a hearing device that was put on my lanyard so that the person with the cochlear implant could actually log it, sort of tune in to this frequency and hear me, to make it more accessible. And I love things like that. I would love to eventually have something like that in the studio, but I have visual cues here. I also send out a questionnaire to my clients to make people feel comfortable when they come in for a photo shoot. It's something that I think is really overlooked. Another mistake I had when I was creating this studio and having the shoe space is that I forgot about quiet months. There are quiet months. Sometimes in the summer when people are away all the time, you're not going to get as many bookings. And right now we're in December, and bar Christmas minis, I'm pretty dead. Luckily, I've got work away from the studio because there's a lot of events I'm covering. But you know, this studio does sit fairly unused in certain months, and it's quite disappointing, and you have to account for those. So just don't think that you can do everything. Now, I could probably go, oh, I could do this for type of photography, but I don't already have a market for it, and it's not something I'm passionate about. And it's, you know, you could say, oh, bills and that, but I don't want to do a bad job and ruin a reputation that I've built up doing good jobs, you know? So for me, be aware that when you own a studio, there will be dead months and quiet months. So yeah, remember that. I think one of the biggest mistakes I ever made was thinking that a studio would make me a legitimate photographer. It's sort of like FOMO. I feel like I was missing out because I didn't have a studio. In actual fact, I'm probably doing more maintenance on the studio than I thought I ever had to do. Like, I'm having to paint regularly, sand the floor down, repaint the floor, fix props, sort out things, you know, like always doing something. My insurance goes up, all sorts of things happen here, and I have to look after it. For me, having a studio is somewhere I can always work from and have stuff, but it also means I've got an added financial burden. It also means that it's something I have to monitor, and I can't just leave it alone for months. I have to clean it regularly. Even if nothing happens in the studio for like a week at a time, I still have to come in and hoover because of dust, because of other things. I need to make sure it's working okay. That also means like every now and then changing the sample pictures over. Why is that? Why does this filter warp everything? It doesn't make me skinnier, but it seems to warp everything. Like, make my head smaller? Yeah, it does. Makes my head smaller. Great, I've got a fat head. It's identified it. Nice. A lot of people think that having a studio makes you legitimate, and I said this earlier on in the video. For me personally, it does not. What makes you a legitimate photographer is how you do your customer experience, what type of work you're doing, what makes you a professional photographer is how you conduct yourself, how you run your business. It's got nothing to do with the premises that you hold, I'll be frank. I actually think sometimes having a studio can make you less professional because people feel a bit more slapdash. And I've seen people, when I've gone to their studio, been a bit shocked at the state of the studio because people aren't inclined to keep it as tidy as it should. It doesn't feel as safe as it should in there. I've been to a studio before where they had bare wires, and that freaked me out quite a bit. So for me, I don't think legitimacy comes from having a space to work from. It definitely comes from having the ability to give your clients what they want and what they pay for. That's the difference. So for me, don't think a studio makes you legitimate. It certainly is a drain on your time because I have to paint things, I have to sand floors, I have to clean, and even if nothing's in here for a month, not that there's ever been a full month with nothing in it, but I still have to hoover and shampoo carpets occasionally and do all sorts of things. And I tell you now, when a baby Poonamis in your studio, the cleaning never seems to stop. Also, I just want to say some of the most profitable photographers I know literally have never had a studio and work from their home or just work on location. That's not to say I haven't made some friends who are absolutely high profile studio photographers, but don't think this somehow magically gives you money. This is not a money tree. It's borderline a money drain at times. It's definitely a time consuming place to have. Also, with the new budget that's just been announced here in the United Kingdom, so if you watch this in 2025, the budget that's coming forward for next year, we might have to find out, well, we might find out that all of our studio costs are going up because they're reevaluating business prices and stuff like that. So yeah, you know, your prices now might be higher, it might even be higher very soon. So yeah, there's always that as well. Here's the thing with like having a studio, okay? It doesn't make you a better photographer. It certainly doesn't make you become a revolutionary photographer in your field. What it does do is create a lot more work for you because you have to maintain it. Like you can hear now, I've got squeaky floorboards somewhere here. I have to sort that out. I also have to heat this place in winter. So expensive. I also have to be able to use it and update it, and things go wrong. This does not make me a better photographer, but I made loads of mistakes when I was a photographer by assuming all of these things I spoke about was all going to be great because I had a studio. I was going to get loads of clients because I had a studio. I was going to be a more professional photographer, had a studio, all of these things. So I hope this video has helped you realize that no, that is not the case. All right, take care. Anyway, I hope this has helped. If you like to subscribe, that'd be great. Yeah, take care of you. Bye.